Hello, my name is Gail Clutton, and I'm here to present the Response to Intervention and the Problem Solving Team Professional Learning Community. So, why Response to Intervention, RTI, and the Problem Solving Team, PST? Bryan Elementary School has more special ed students than comparable schools, almost 18%, compared to about 10% in other schools. Over the past 4 years, Bryan has averaged over 30 referrals for special education evaluations each year. That tells me that RTI interventions have not proven effective, so students do not make adequate progress. Students get placed on Tier 2. Typically, they get moved to Tier 3, or they stay on Tier 2. Students get placed on Tier 2 when they have grades on progress reports that place them in danger of failing, instead of looking at specific skills that they are missing. Then, when they continue to struggle, they're moved to Tier 3 without any discussion of where or what they're struggling with. Students that get placed on Tier 3, many of them get referred for special education evaluation. They stay on Tier 3 for 8 weeks. Then if they don't show improvement, they get referred for special education evaluation instead of having strategies and interventions looked at and determine whether that's the best strategy. So what are our goals for this PST? The reason for targeting response to intervention is that we have a problem-solving team in place, but in my experience, the process merely consists of teachers telling the interventionist that a student is moving tiers without any explanation of what they need. The purpose of RTI and the problem-solving team is to target students who are struggling, which would improve student performance on grade level standards. That in turn is going to improve and boost student confidence in their abilities and ultimately reduce the number of referrals for special education evaluation. How are we going to accomplish this? Well, the Alabama State Department of Education has an administrative code that already defines RTI and the problem-solving team. So the PLC will be guided by the Alabama Administrative Code, which tells us that we have to have scientifically research-based instruction and curriculum, and our interventions need to be evidence-based. The Alabama Administrative Code is guiding us, and the Alabama Course of Study is giving us the specific information about what each grade level is supposed to be learning. So who is going to be involved? Well, regular ed teachers in the same grade level are going to be on this PLC. They can collaborate with each other to ensure that they each have the same understanding of what the Alabama Course of Study is telling them to teach and how it's supposed to be taught, and then to look at different skills that need to be examined and interventions that are effective for those different skills. There will be a special education teacher involved because the special education teachers already have training in interventions that work with students that are having difficulties. The interventionist will also be on this PLC because that's who guides going from tier to tier and what type of intervention would be best suited in that Tier 3. And of course, we want to have administrator involved because the administrator can make judgments and decisions based on curriculum and what types of materials can be used and where to find those materials. Yay! The roles of the different people on the problem-solving team. So one of the general ed teachers will be asked to be the record keeper. That is to keep up with the paperwork showing which students are moving between tiers and what their specific skill set is that they need to have some extra help with. That way we can determine who needs what kind of help. The best way to maybe see them in groups that share the same sort of skills that they need intervention on, and celebrate when they move down from a higher tier to a lower tier. We also would like to have one of the regular ed teachers be the timekeeper to keep our sessions at 30 minutes. We need to be able to effectively and efficiently discuss each student's progress or lack of progress, make a decision as to what happens with each individual student, and then move on. We also would like to have a regular ed teacher be the discussion monitor. That is making sure that we're staying on track and that all of what we are doing is necessary for this 30-minute meeting. We know we all get along and hanging out together doesn't happen very often. We might get sidetracked. So the discussion monitor is there to help keep everybody on track. Another position that needs to be tackled is the strategy or intervention resource person. Typically, I would expect this to be the special ed teacher and the intervention teacher because they have resources at their fingertips for small group interventions and types of different learning strategies to work with different learning styles. And then, of course, the resource provider in this case would be the administrator that is part of the PLC. So the new PLC will begin in August during professional development days. In August, we will outline the purpose of the PLC, assign the roles, and schedule the meetings. Then in September, we'll start looking at current PST students. By September, you shouldn't have anybody new moving onto Tier 2 because they need to have 8 weeks at each tier before they start moving. But we should have students who rolled over from the previous year. So we'll discuss those current students, determine where they stand, and begin the process of identifying what specific skills and instruction they are going to need in Tier 2 and Tier 3. I feel like in September of this next year, this piece will be vital because that hasn't been done for students who are currently on Tier 3 intervention, and maybe even some of those on Tier 2. Besides, 2020-21 school year has not been typical. We've had kids on remote, we've had kids out on quarantine, so we may not even know what skills these kids are missing. So we need to take the time in September to identify those current students. Meetings will then take place once a month during grade level joint planning time, and I expect to take about 30 minutes. Hopefully we won't have so many students on Tier 3 that we need to take more time than that. So why a PLC? Well, experts in PLCs explain that when teachers are involved in a process that is meaningful and effective, it promotes student learning in the school. Also, teachers are more engaged, and teachers with higher engagement are teachers who are going to buy into the process. A PLC also provides support for all teachers, seasoned teachers as well as first-year teachers. Seasoned teachers know the process, but still can be helped to refine how best to help students. And first-year teachers can be introduced to the RTI and PST process and right from the beginning, learn best practices for working with struggling students from the very beginning of their teaching career. So what should an effective PLC do? Well, literature tells us that in order to be effective, a PLC needs to answer 4 questions. These questions become the driving force of the PLC. Under response to intervention model, these questions can be drilled down to individual student levels using appropriate evidence-based strategies, instruction, response to instruction, assessment, and enrichment. So the first question is, what essential information do students need to learn? Well, students definitely need to learn grade level standards. That would be the first place to go. And starting with the Alabama course of study, it outlines what essential information students need in every grade. Question 2 is, how will we know if they have learned it? Well, there need to be formative and summative assessments at Tier 1. And then we can use that data to determine if students have learned what they need to learn and we are ready to move on to the next step, or if there are a few students who are struggling. Next question, how should we respond if students aren't learning? Well, this is where the tier process comes into being, because if students aren't learning and we've taken the time to reteach, then we need to have some assessments to see if we can figure out where they're missing skills and what skills and strategies we should use to make sure that they master those skills that they're missing which keeps them from learning what they're supposed to be learning. And the final question is, what do we do when the students know the material? Well, on the tiered system, an efficient system would take a student to tier 3 when they're struggling with a specific skill. That interventionist can work with that student on that specific skill. And then when the student knows the material, the student can go back to tier 2, back into the classroom, and hopefully back to tier 1 because they've learned what they need to learn. The problem that I see happening now is that students get on tier 3 and then they stay on tier 3. They get pulled out of class 30 minutes a day, several times a week for tier 3 intervention, instead of sticking to a specific skill and teaching that specific skill so they can go back into the classroom and apply that skill to the next skill. They stay in tier 3 and miss classroom instruction. So tier 2 and tier 3 should be designed for students to go back into the classroom, back into whole group teaching, and become independent. The tiered system has to have some assessment tools and progress monitoring in place. Luckily for us, Jefferson County has already developed progress monitoring graphs for math and for reading and for behavior. They've provided some universal screener checklists as well as just some data following. So all of that information is already available on the Jefferson County shared drive for RTI, and we will make use of that. That information also then becomes the basis for the data that drives decisions about being assessed for special education services. So we'll have some paperwork that's already in place that is universal, that is understood by everybody, and can be used from school to school, and could be sent down to the board to document a student not being able to perform on grade level. Response to intervention and the problem-solving team is a process where we engage, assess, and improve student progress, teacher engagement, and instead of taking failure after failure after failure, we would like to climb the ladder to success. Are there any questions?